Welcome to episode 85 of Rubbish Talk with me, Alasdair Meldrum.
And me, Jane Bond.
And this week we are going to take a journey into waste paper and cardboard. What happens to it once it's been collected and how it gets recycled. But before that, big news from the Albion team, Jane.
Yes, well, we've got a Investors in People Award for Albion Environmental, recognised as UK Business of the Year Gold for our staff, and Alasdair's waving around the fancy thing. So Alasdair and Mia.
This only works for people that watch the podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Obviously for the listeners, they can't see anything.
So Alasdair and Mia went down to London in their fancy frocks and fancy kilts and all this sort of stuff, all dressed up. And yeah, we sat at the table and we've got a little video of them being collecting their awards. It's like the BAFTAs, isn't it? I didn't see you doing a speech afterwards, though.
There was no speech allowed. Well, there was a speech. We had to go and talk to the marketing team afterwards. And Mia very kindly prepared a ChatGPT speech at the table and shared it with the rest of the table, because the rest of the table were worried they were going to have to make a speech. So they were most impressed with our ChatGPT skills. So it was actually quite a good speech it did as well. It was very impressive. But no, it was really, really impressive awards. And you know how many kilts there were, Jane? I was wearing my kilt. How many other kilts there were out? 650 guests.
Just you?
Oh, 750, I'm being told.
Just you?
There was only one other kilt apart from me.
Really?
Me plus one other. That was it. But at least one of the kilts went up on stage. So.
Did you meet your other kilt? And
if I did, I introduced myself
kilts?
to him. I felt obliged to introduce myself to him. So there you go. So well done to the team. It wasn't myself and Mia's award. It was the whole team's award. So. Yeah, good to get a bit of recognition.
Yeah, well, that's good. So next news is I was watching BBC News at the weekend, and this came on about this massive big fly tipping mountain of waste, and it came up on the news, but they never really said anything about it. So I was on YouTube and all this, having a look, and basically there's a mountain of waste in a field in Oxfordshire. I mean, if you look at the picture, right, because there'll be the link on there, you can see it's just like a big long ribbon of waste. And it's saying it's about 6 meters high and about 150 meters long or something like that. It's just enormous. And you think, how can nobody see it? How did people not see it?
That's not happened. It's not happened overnight, is it?
No.
It's not happened overnight. That's happened over there's been machines there to place that and so on. It's just nuts that sort of thing can happen.
Yeah,
there was a post. Somebody put up a post. Part of the article is similar. There's not enough Environment Agency officers to deal with waste crime, and then an operator put up a post saying they had 4 officers in checking the height of their piles, and they're thinking there's 4 officers for that in a largely compliant site, and then there's illegal activity like that happening. So I did do a bit of a rant on LinkedIn about it, saying, look, if we're going to keep increasing landfill tax, if we're going to put emission trading scheme taxes on waste, we're going to have to get a lot better at dealing with some of that illegal activity. And it's not the waste industry, it's the illegal sector. So,
and it says here, the Environment Agency said it has limited resources for enforcement, and the estimated cost of removal is greater than the entire annual budget of the local district council. I mean, yeah, it's just... I don't know. It's just bonkers. Anyway, you've got another news about sheep.
Yeah,
news.
I spotted this. This is an Australian one, so we're going all the way to Australia for one. I did have a Japanese one about something else, but it looked a bit rubbish. So we'll go for the Australian one, and this is Joanne Howarth. Hopefully, I've pronounced that right. Planet Protector Group, and what they've been doing is taking wool from sheep and turning into cutting-edge insulation for the built environment. A bit of her rant was that they're handling, 150 tonne a week of this material, but they reckon that Australia still dumps something like 19,000 tonnes of polystyrene that this material would replace. And they reckon they're almost halfway there to replacing half of that. And the trials with this material is it can maintain temperatures below -20, and for 144 hours, and the materials match or exceed petroleum alternatives in every metric. So we'll put a wee link to it. It was quite an interesting story in terms of what they're trying to do with it.
Because I was like, well, why don't we make jumpers out of it, instead of making packaging? But apparently people don't have them. Obviously, they don't need that many jumpers in Australia anyway, possibly. Nope. And, people wear fleeces.
Nobody wants a wool jumper anymore, Jane.
Do you know what the trouble with wool jumpers is? You have to wash them by hand. How annoying is that?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want a stretchy plastic one that
dispenses
microfiber plastic fibres into the environment.
Yeah, okay. So
being cynical today.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next one I've got is an energy from waste plant in Flintshire County Council has seen a major drop in waste. Flintshire County Council has seen a major drop in waste sent to the energy plant as a new bin system boosts recycling. So they've gone for a 3 weekly bin collections and increased recycling rates and reduced 3,000 fewer tonnes of rubbish to an energy from waste facility than it had by this time last year, which, is quite, it's quite significant, isn't it? Just by introducing the 3 weekly bin collections, whether or not all that rubbish is now down in Oxfordshire in a big field is kind of, hopefully not. So yeah, I suppose it's always a thing, isn't it? Is making sure there's still enough waste to go into that energy from waste plant to make sure it still does its job.
Well, I suppose the bit I never read into this was whether that 3,000 tonne that's not going to the waste energy plant is now appearing in the recycle it. I'm hoping it does.
Yeah, not in a field in Oxfordshire.
Yeah, it does show you that, moving to reducing the collection frequency does work, and it's been proven time and time again, particularly in, I think way back Falkirk Council was one of the first ones that went to 3 weekly. They thought about going to a 4 weekly collection, but they thought that was too big a step. And they actually regretted it was, a couple of years later, they end up moving to a 4 weekly. So they did it in 2 stages. And the thought afterwards was it would have been better just taking a big step in the, moving to a 4 weekly collection.
Yeah, you'd only have 1 complains rather than 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
It only works if people use the system.
Well, yeah.
It only works if people use the system as it was designed. So I think the last one I've got is it's not a waste one, actually. I love this one. So this is a thing called Heat Hub, which was developed by Thermify and is part of UK Power Network Shields project. And what it does is, how all these computer data centres use loads of energy and produce loads of heat? Well, what you can do is you can have 500 computers in your garden shed, and I think it's probably a bit more in a garden shed, and then you can use the waste heat from that to heat your house.
I think that's brilliant.
Do you like that?
Yeah,
I love that idea.
Yeah. You'd have to have a very secure garden shed, to be fair, though.
Well, I think it's slightly more. I think you've got to have more than just a garden shed. I think you need as a proper setup. But
yeah.
So the idea is you have lots of these wee mini data centres around the country, heating houses, and at the same time as looking after all Mia's Instagram photos at the data centre.
Absolutely. And the last one we've got here, and we're going to do a cynical thing again.
Oh, poor woman.
Well, yes. This woman fined £1,000 for fly tipping envelope, and there's a big thing here about how all she did was put an envelope outside her flat in Feltham next. We've kind of looked at it and think, oh yeah, if you just put an envelope in there, that's not really very fair, blah, blah, blah. But then you actually look at the pictures and there's an envelope on the top of a load of cardboard boxes. So it's not even in the bin in the first place. And you kind of think, where did the cardboard boxes come from? Why did you put your one bit of paper down? And why didn't you just put it in your bin at home? So, yeah.
I would say deserves a fine. Not looking after her, even if it was genuine that it was somebody else that put the side waste there, and then she added to the side waste. I would say that deserves a fine. It's back to this: take responsibility for your waste and look after it properly. Just because somebody else has left stuff at the side of a bin doesn't mean you can keep doing that. So, and not much sympathy here, but you never know. There's maybe another side to the story. We can't tell that from the article,
from the letter that she'd obviously thrown away.
Yeah. So that's news for the day. So what we're going to chat about now is continuing our theme of waste journeys. We're going to look at paper and cardboard. And I'll confess here, thanks to Rod Patterson, who we had on Rubbish Talk episode 66. So if you want to listen to a true expert about paper and cardboard, have a listen back to that one. So Rod is the senior purchasing manager at Ekman Recycling, and they focus primarily on paper and cardboard. So he's given me some of the stats and information. So if it's wrong, if anybody's got any quibbles about it, Rod's your man. Don't bother. Don't bother. Pass on the details for Rod.
Yeah, we can't afford
So
that.
Jane and I we're gonna run through, try and chat through some of the issues, chat through what happens, and hopefully make sense of it for people.
Yeah, I was going to say we can't afford a Trump-like suing of our stats if they're slightly wrong.
Absolutely.
So our headline figures, right? So 6.5 million tonnes of paper and cardboard produced in the UK, and we were talking about this last week, weren't we? On our information about that the document that we were reviewing. 3 million tonnes recycled in the UK, so we've still got 3.5 million tonnes that's exported to Europe, India, and Southeast Asia, and price is very dependent on global prices and markets, and that's always a problem. We always look at letsrecycle.com and they give you loads of different market prices, which can just differ between 1 month to the next pretty significantly. But you're going to talk about the current prices, Alasdair.
Yeah, so it's always hard, as Jane was saying, to get accurate prices. At the moment, cardboard, if you've got bales of cardboard, you can approximately get £110 a tonne. If you get bales of paper, you can get about £150 a tonne. But that obviously depends on where you are, transport to markets and so on. So there is a bit of variation there, and that does go up and down. But what's important to think about is the value of that versus if that material was going into landfill or waste energy, it'd be costing anything up to £200 a tonne. So there's it's a good £300 differential between going for disposal versus going for recycle it. So there is a real incentive to actually recycle it. One of the things Rod was very clear about making out was that there is, there's lots and lots of different grades of paper and cardboard, but the industry is quite focused on post-consumer and pre-consumer. So post-consumer is the stuff that's going into the household recycling bins or the commercial recycling bins, and the pre-consumer is stuff, back up the supply chain, if you like, before it's actually getting to the customers. And the pre-consumer stuff is usually a lot cleaner, so it's usually getting a much higher value than the post-consumer stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, because when you look at your recycling, paper and cardboard, so if you collect that from household and commercial waste, then it goes into a materials recycling or material recovery facility, and that looks at how to take out all that contamination. So it could be, I don't know, it could be food, it could be plastic, it could be stuff that you've inadvertently put in that recycling paper and cardboard that shouldn't be in there. The industry recognised standard is supposed to be less than 1.5%, but we've got some data here that came from SEPA website for SECA, and their quality data says it's round about 48% cardboard. It's quite a lot of cardboard, obviously, because of your Amazon packages. 36, there are other providers. 36% paper. Reduction significantly in paper because we don't read newspapers anymore. 11.6% non-recyclable material. 2.5% non-target material. So non-recyclable means stuff that is maybe paper and card, but is really contaminated with food or something like that. And then 2.5% non-target material, so that means you've put a can of Coke in there or something like that, or a bit of plastic bottle. And then 1.9% target other / fragment, so that probably means something like shredded paper or something like that. So 84% of that would be actual target material, and 16% would be contamination at non-target materials. That's quite a lot of contamination, that, and having to take that out. And you can see it's actually increased quite significantly as well, the contamination over the time period.
it's a massive amount of contamination, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is like everybody knows what paper and cardboard is. How difficult can this be that almost 20% of that bin, almost a fifth of the bin is contamination? And Rod was telling me all sorts of horror stories about what they're finding in terms of nappies and dog poo and all sorts of stuff. It's just absolute bonkers. But the way the data Jane quoted there was from the MRF Code of Practice data. So every material recycling facility in the UK has to do waste analysis on the input material and the output material. And the reason I picked Saika was, I know for a fact they only take paper and cardboard, so it was easier to read their things. We're not picking on Saika. That's just the fact of what they get in through the door, and this is where we could be much better in terms of improving that quality and just making it a bit easier for everybody concerned. So one of the things I extracted was the little graph, and there's a real change in the data between 219 and 220, and I would love to know the reasons. The non-recyclable material went from 8% up to almost 18-19% in that period, and I'm sure I'm fairly convinced that'll be due to Saika taking on a contract with a certain local authority that's got fairly heavily contaminated material.
Do you not think 1920 was our COVID years, and whether there was loads of masks in there and things like that and stuff? I don't know.
Sure. I think that this is I'm going to start ranting here. This is a frustrating thing. So we've got this MRF Code of Practice that we're collecting all this data and we're doing absolutely hee-haw with it. We're not actually looking into it. We're not analysing it. We're not trying to work out what could be better, what could be worse, how we change things, which is all a bit depressing. But anyway, so talking about contamination, the obvious ones is the plastic tape you get in the boxes and so on. I know when I put my stuff in the cardboard bin, I will try and remove as much of the plastic tape as possible. Again, when I was chatting to Rod was very much, he says the paper mills are actually, they know they're going to get plastic tape, so they're actually set up to remove it. So his view is take off what you can easily and then put it in the box. And the other classic one is the old pizza box scenario. So I know some councils will say you're not allowed a pizza box in your cardboard bin. I always think that's a bit of nonsense. And again, after checking with Rod, he was very much the case. What they don't want is food waste. So if there is food waste, heavily contaminated food waste, then they don't want that in the cardboard recycling. But if it's just a little bit grease in the bottom, then that's not an issue. And my rule of thumb is always, if in doubt, tear off the contaminated section, and that can probably go in your food waste bin, and then the rest of the cardboard can quite easily go in your cardboard recycling.
I think the other tip there is actually eat your pizza before you put it in the bin.
Well, I don't understand. Well, I don't actually understand this food waste bin in terms of pizza. I don't get that at all. So yeah, absolutely eat your pizza. And then the other main type was sort of, I put here Tetra Pak and coffee cups. So everybody, quite often people look at a coffee cup and think it's cardboard. It's in reality not cardboard. It's got a plastic liner to it. And that's very similar to your Tetra Pak that it's got your orange juice in it. That's cardboard with a plastic liner and sometimes a metal liner. Now these can be recycled, but they've got to go to special plants, and we'll come on to that later on as we discuss plants. So that's the main contaminations.
What gets me though is coffee cups, and people, do that green thing and say, oh yes, I've bought these coffee cups and they're all fully recyclable and compostable, blah, blah, blah. And then they just put them in the normal waste rubbish. It's like,
but they don't go in the compost bin.
Yeah,
so you're wasting your money.
Totally. So anyway, what happens next? So we've got it all at the plant. We've taken out all the, all that massive amount of contaminants, and then it's all baled. So it's separated into paper and cardboard, and then it's baled and wire wrapped. So you get these massive bales of cardboard or massive bales of paper. Much easier to move around than a whole load of paper flying around everywhere. So that's when you get your weight. So that's when you get your cost per tonne. So whatever, £10 or £100 for your cardboard, £110 for your cardboard, or paper £150. So this is a point where you actually hopefully get your money for it, and then off it goes. what we don't want is wet. Quite good because it does weigh a bit more. But anything above 10% will reduce the value. 10% water. So they don't want to pay for water, which is, fair comment. So once it's trekked around the country, off it goes to the paper mill.
Yeah, so the old trick that used to be in the old days, you used to get your bales of paper and cardboard, and then you run the hose in the top of the load overnight and then send it down to the paper mill. So the paper mill was basically a load of wet, soggy cardboard that you got more money from. The paper mills are now wise to that. And the normal moisture content of paper and card is into between 7 and 8%, and they're looking for 10% or less generally. What happens when it gets to the paper mill? It goes into a big holding yard effectively, and they basically make the paper or paper in terms of it's almost like a recipe. The bales of paper will get put onto a conveyor. The wires, the metal wire wrap or the wire wrap will get cut, and that wire will be recycled. That paper then gets mixed with processing water, and it's still stirred in a big giant stainless steel vat called the pulper. And that makes like this fibre suspension. Well, it basically is. So they had massive amount of water. It's mad. They spent all the time at the front end of the process adding water, and then they spent all the time at the back end of the process drying the material. Once it's all mixed up into the sort of pulp, that's where there's a series of screens to remove any of the contamination, the plastic wrap, and so on. And the type of the plants that are doing Tetra Pak and so on, what they've got at the front end is just more screens in terms of cleaning up the material.
So once we've got all this pulpy stuff, we try and remove the water. So with all the pulpy stuff, the solution is about 1% fibre or paper or whatever, 99% water. So if you dilute the paper fibres, it allows more thin, uniform paper, apparently. So then you have to kind of roll it, get all the contaminants out, get all the paper out, get all the water out. It's quite a interesting process, really. I think taking the fibre out, taking the water out tries to, it tries to make it so that the paper and the fibres are all woven in together. And then it says here, passes over a suction box that vacuums out the water, leaving a soft mat of pulp that forms the paper sheet, also known as a paper web. So it's just like a big, massive...
They seem to sort of spray the...
Yeah.
From what I understand, they sort of spray that pulpy liquid material over a wire network, and that's where the fibres get formed, and it's a really fine layer that they pass over it.
Yeah, and the water drops to 75 to 80%, and that gets as much as possible. It just gets all that water out, but it's quite like to go and see that actually.
But the thing that got me when I was reading into it, by now the paper has travelled 30 to 40 metres. So this is, this goes a long way. So the next stage is they keep removing the water by rolling it. It compresses the fibres, and then they intertwine to form a denser, smooth sheet. And that's reduced the water content down to about between 45 and 50%. And then once it's down to that level, then it travels through an enclosed space containing a number of steam-heated dry cylinders. They're warmed up to 130 degrees, and that dries the paper to get it to between 80 and 85% dry. And then what they do then is they add a thin layer of starch to the surface, and that helps contribute to the stiffness and the bond in the fibres on the sheet paper. And by this time, overall, the paper will have travelled 400 metres from the very start to this part of the process, and 93% of the water is lost in the process. As I said at the start, that you start off with paper and card with moisture content at 10%. You then add loads and loads of water, and then through the process you dry it back out. So it's obviously a really intensive process in terms of both water use and energy use.
And then I suppose, because it really depends on what type of paper that's produced as well, isn't it? Because you can get that sort of rough, kind of grey, sort of yellowy recycled paper, or you can get nice, smooth, glossy paper where you can print on it and all that sort of stuff. So that goes through another set of smooth rollers that press that paper, making a smooth face on the paper surface. So that makes you nice, white, clean, fancy, nice paper. So I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Extremely fine control over the variables in the manufacturing process, which is the input, the amount of water, the amount of rolling. Then they inspect it, or automatic device to inspect this water, this paper, for any imperfections, any bits of lumps of stuff that's got in there by mistake or whatever. So, it's quite a process, isn't it, actually?
Yeah. Yeah, so finally at the end of the process, so says here after 500 metre journey, this was a specific plant, so they'll not all be 500 metres. Paper exits from the paper machine and is automatically wound onto a jumbo reel, which can weigh up to 60 tonnes and be over 7 metres long. But what happened? What I understand happens with paper is that this is almost the very first step of the journey. So that big jumbo reel will then be cut up into smaller sections, and that'll be sent off for be made into various products. So sometimes it'll be sent to be made into cards. Some will be, into office paper or newspaper, and so on. So really, the paper mill is the first part of the process. There's then other facilities further down the line, and obviously they've got this regular testing of the paper they produced. A lot of it comes down to the front end in terms of that, if you like, that recipe of the material coming in, and obviously contamination will be their big issue in terms of making sure there's no contamination caught through. One of the things Rod was explaining to me was about the ink. If they take a lot of newspaper, they've got to remove the ink. Because there is a bit of an issue potentially between using newsprint and then that potentially having contact with food waste, not food waste with food, and they've got to be really careful to remove all the ink from the process. So depending on what they're taking as input depends on what they've got to do to clean the material up. So
yeah, so there's different mills for different paper. Yeah, particularly, yeah. I always think that I was told that the more you recycle it, the shorter the fibres become. And the shorter the fibres become, you end up with toilet paper at the end or paper towels at the end. So there's not a huge number of outlets in Scotland, is there? And I think there's only 2 paper mills that use virgin material, and the rest do take in. But again, not a lot of outlets in Scotland. There's one big paper mill, there's a couple of paper mills down in England that take the recycled paper as well. And one plant in the UK which does Tetra Pak. So realistically, there could be more. I mean, we do have paper mills in Scotland, but they don't take recycled paper, from what I understand.
I think it's just the size and scale of these plants that it's very difficult to sustain a plant in Scotland. So one of the virgin pulp plants is at Irvine, just up the road from our office here. Yeah, but it's certainly in terms of, we're certainly not handling all the paper and cardboard that's produced in the UK, and certainly the market has changed in terms of, as you said, Jane, the newsprint is in decline, so there's less and less newspaper being produced, but the increase in cardboard and making more cardboard is had seen a significant rise. So that's the process. Just in terms of just a little bit about inputs, outputs. So obviously, if they're taking in recycled paper and cardboard, what are the outputs? So you've got the wire that can be recycled, so they remove that for recycling. The contamination is obviously a cost of the operation, so that will go for either landfill or waste energy. Some of the plants have got a combined heat and power plant where they've got permit to actually burn that material and recover the energy and use that energy to power the plant, because obviously the plants are very energy intensive. And then the other thing they've got is they've obviously got lots and lots of wastewater, but their priority as much as possible to reuse that wastewater as much as possible. So they've all got quite specialised water treatment facilities to keep that water on a loop. So in terms of a process, it does work. It's tried and tested. Just the thing we need is more facilities doing that in the UK, but whether they're sustainable with energy costs in the UK or not is a different matter.
Yeah, and I suppose where we can help households and businesses and making sure we don't put everything else in with the paper and card, and just make sure it's paper and card and nothing else. Because we have now The local authorities have now got twin stream, haven't they? So the paper and card is totally separate. So in theory, there shouldn't be as much contamination in there as there was previously when it was commingled with everything else. So hopefully, if we've got that commingled quality, which is better, less contamination, we can actually be able to recycle as much as possible in Scotland. But like you say, you need energy and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to say, think of the different price councils could get. So, if you're a council sending waste to a recycling facility with almost 20% contamination, you'll be getting charged for that. So rather than a revenue of £120 a tonne, that 20% is going to have a cost of £200 a tonne. That's a big cost. There's a big potential saving there. And I know from talking to Rod, he said one of the things that had made a big improvement in Scotland was the twin stream. So, having a separate bin for just paper and cardboard had improved the quality significantly in some areas. So there are positives in there. So there we go. So that's...
I just like the bit about it comes in, we make porridge out of it. And then we roll it and roll it and roll it to get the water out of it. And then, I'm sure you can make paper at home.
It's a bit more complicated than that, I'm sure, in terms of how they do it. But you can mess about with doing that at home. I think it's the drying that's the problem at home, isn't it? You've not got the heated rollers and so on to make your paper.
Yeah, but you're used to make paper mache stuff, and but it's not quite the same.
So that was our journey into paper and cardboard. Thank you, as I said at the start, to Rod Patterson, who sort of helped point me in the right direction in terms of what actually happens in the real world of paper and cardboard recycling. So what's next, Jane?
I think we got enough stats in there, didn't we? I was just making sure we'd covered all our stats because we do like our numbers. Yeah. Well, I suppose the next bit.
I think. Sorry, I was going to say that I think paper and card is one of these ones that is genuinely recycled. Sometimes you worry the plastic side of things. You think, you're taking plastic bottles and you're turning them into plastic benches or whatever. Is it really recycling? Whereas paper and card is one of these things where you take paper and card and you turn it back into paper and card. So
yeah,
and it is pretty tried and tested. It's been going on for years and years and years. So yeah, I think there's definitely a positive news story around the paper and card.
Yeah, that's good. Anything else? Any rants? I don't think we've got much of a rant this week, have we?
Well, it's not really a rant. I think I've probably shared on here before. I've been away quite a lot, between wee jolly down to the Investors and People in London, to the CRWM event, to the Scottish Business Conference. And you're in rooms with all sorts of inspirational people and companies and loads of good things going on. And then you turn on the news in the UK and it's just negative. I sometimes think we just need to start focusing on the positives a bit more and just get on with things. So that's my rant for the week. It's not really a rant, but
I think we had some positives in our chat today, didn't we? We've got the heat from Mia's photos being uploaded into a server, and I think that's quite a positive thing. We've got the Investors in People, so yeah, we're going positive.
Yeah, we're going for positive. There we go. So that's all from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you again next Thursday at 4 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share with friends, and send us your feedback at hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.